So we are now officially going to kind of take a little bit of a lunch break. If you need to step off for a few minutes, you're more than welcome to. We're going to bring on some of the hosts and some of the speakers and have a little bit of a roundtable discussion and talk for about the next half hour into our next talk. So first, I want to introduce you to Matt Coulter. Matt is actually the guy who originally came up with the idea of the CDK Day, and he has really put this thing together and led the charge on it. So Matt, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, so for anyone who doesn't know me, as introduced, I'm Matt Coulter. I'm an architect for Liberty IT, which is in Belfast and Dublin, but also Liberty Mutual globally. So basically, to explain why I wanted to do CDK Day, let me briefly explain what my role is. So if you Google at any point serverless Liberty or Liberty Mutual serverless, you'll find that Liberty loves serverless. We believe in rapidly delivering business value through sustainable, well-architected pipelines, and we want to live that serverless first lifestyle. So my role is pretty much for thousands, hundreds, thousands of developers worldwide. How can we make that happen? I'm not in a dev team anymore. My role is to create an environment where our developers are enabled and inspired to do that. So that's why I've spent this year creating CDK patterns, which followed a lot of the principles that Werner talked about yesterday in his keynote. How do we create abstractions that can deploy serverless, well-architected patterns and accelerate developers in one line of code? So I'd been building those patterns and I'd seen that the adoption had been phenomenal, but it was a couple of months ago and it was pretty much mid-lockdown, and I was thinking, who is everybody that's using CDK? We don't meet up very often at all. In fact, so there's the CDK Power Hour in Germany, which has an international version. But outside of that, the only other place I know that we meet was last year at reInvent. There was an open bar session. Mm-hmm. So I sent a message to a group of y'all, and 2 weeks later, we announced CDK Day to the world. So it was pretty rapid.
That's awesome. Yeah. And, this has been about 6 or 8 weeks in the planning, and to get up to, the 3,000 people we had signed up with is just absolutely amazing. So thank you for all the effort you put in together on this and really organizing all of this and promoting it and everything. I think it's come together really fantastic. So we're also going to bring in Marek. Some of you have already seen Marek. He's been helping us with the transitions and the co-hosting on this. Marek, can you go ahead and introduce yourself again real quick?
Sure, yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Marek Kuczynski. I'm a solution architect at AWS. Sorry about that. And I work actually mainly on serverless architecture. So basically helping customers with, implementing serverless, a bit of education. And over the years, actually, one of the reasons why I'm also involved here, I've been a huge, initially actually a Terraform fan. Then I moved on to SAM. But kind of the CDK thing was something that really struck me and a lot of my customers as well. So yeah, super excited to be here at this day. I think also, it's coming together really well so far. And happy to see this actually a reality. So
excellent. Thank you for joining us today and helping with all this. We've also got Thorsten. Thorsten's been also helping us with some transitions and hosting. Thorsten, welcome again.
Yeah, hi.
We've also got a special guest. This is Sebastian. Sebastian, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell you how you're involved with the CDK community?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Sebastian Kaufmann, and I'm primarily involved in the Terraform CDK or CDK for Terraform, as Mishra mentioned earlier in the session. And then Matthew and I teamed up for the CDK dev thing, like the Slack channel, which is everyone using at the moment. And I started to run a newsletter, and so at the moment pretty deeply involved in the entire CDK ecosystem. And happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent, thank you. We're going to go ahead and bring back also Elad. He, was involved as principal engineer on the CDK team. He gave that talk early on Progen, which has been, garnering a lot of attention over on the Slack channel. We see a lot of people talking about it, which is really cool. We're going to see exactly how many people we can get in this. We've got the 6 panels so far. Let's see if we can toss in a few more people in there. We got Mishra back. Mishra talked a little bit earlier about the Terraform CDK. Welcome back, Mishra. Thank you again. We've also got a very special guest coming up next. You may have seen him in a different guise before, but now we'd like to formally introduce you to the official/unofficial CDK mascot.
This happened. Hello, everybody. I am Pancakes. They made me put this on, but that's okay. I can't type in these. First time ever I've had more than one finger, so that's interesting. So yes, if you've seen me before, you've seen me in a squirrel outfit, and now today I'm in the Pancakes outfit. So try to keep a straight face. Let's try to keep this professional. Let's move on here. So I'm thrilled to be here, very honestly. I will tell you, so far, I have learned a ton about CDK, and I've been very interested. Elad, I want to take a minute and ask you about, first of all, am I saying your name right? Elad? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Elad is the...
Right. So what that nod that Elad gave me was that's the closest you're ever going to come to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So Matt and I decided, first of all, that I look hot in this, so I'm now calling myself a hotter. So just throwing that out there. So Elad, there was a lot of great response with Progen. What's next? I mean, you kind of talked about it there, but seeing the response, what's next with Progen?
For Progen?
Yeah, Progen. So I said that wrong too. Yeah. Thanks for correcting me live, though. I appreciate that. I'm an otter, dude. Come on.
As I said, I think it's an open source project, and so what's next is just evolution, right? Like organic evolution, getting more people to use it, provide feedback, submit issues and pull requests, contribute, making it getting it to a place where we feel it's stable and powerful. We're actually using Progen in CDKs. The CDKs repository is using Progen itself. And we're planning to use Progen for the CDKs init command. And I hope that when it stabilizes sufficiently for the AWS CDK, which is in a different state, then maybe we'll use Progen for CDK init, which currently is based on some templating and stuff like that. But the idea is just get people to use it, I guess.
I'll quickly kind of insert myself here. Actually, Elad, Sebastian's using Progen for our pre-populated generated providers repository and organization. So all our new like kind of pre-built providers are being shipped using that.
Yeah. And also, Progen officially makes one of my first CDK blogs completely redundant about how to set up that, which, as a developer who would prefer to remove code than add it, I'm actually really happy about that. I like the fact that people don't have to follow some 30-step process to get CDK constructs building now. Now they just type a couple of buttons, and like a lot of what the CDK does, it makes it really simple to do complex things. So awesome job. Can't wait to start using that on all of our projects.
Yeah, let me know what you think. I'm very interested.
Will do. So we did have one question that came up in the chat. I wanted to go ahead and mention it here, and then the rest of this discussion is mostly just going to sort of be a little free form for the next 20 minutes or so until we get into our next talk. But the question was, and this is kind of directed at you, Elad, can you speak to how the CDK has actually been adopted internally within AWS, and whether it's been a dog-fooded product or whether it's sort of still shunned as more of a, oh, well, this is going to be for our clients, not for us directly?
So again, I told you guys a little bit about this, the origin story and how we kind of got it started, and one of the teams that we initially approached when we started the CDK was this internal teams that's part of what we call the Builder Tools organization. It's the internal developer tools organization at Amazon, and it serves all of Amazon developers. And this team was responsible to enable internal users to use AWS natively. And so that was the kind of best foot in the door that we can have at a very early stage of the project. And they were quite involved in what we were doing because they've had a CloudFormation-based framework for using native AWS, using AWS natively. And so they were quite involved in the project from very early on, and we try to make sure that everybody internally knows about the CDK. Obviously, Amazon is huge, so it's not that easy. But the thing that actually made a huge difference internally, and I think it's true for any, like we actually had a kind of like a killer app for the CDK. This internal team created a construct library, a CDK construct library for the internal CI/CD system. Amazon has a pretty crazy internal CI/CD system. We're actually trying to externalize many of those components as AWS services, but still, the internal system it's been in development for 15 years now, and it's basically a tool that everybody at Amazon uses. And so this internal team created a CDK construct library that allowed internal teams to define their CI/CD pipelines using CDK, and that blew up basically because these internal pipelines, you can imagine what a pipeline for a standard AWS service looks like. Deploying to all the regions with integration testing and bake time and enormous amounts of alarms. And so what happened is that this internal library became the killer app for internal adoption. And once this library was released, we saw a spike in internal adoption. The internal CDK Slack channel has, I think, over 3,000 users just internally. And so there's a pretty vibrant internal community around the CDK, and it's very similar to the external community. Like we see the same type of enthusiasm and initiative, and people are sharing construct libraries. We're still not where we want to be. I think I met with Matt maybe a year ago or something, and he showed me some stuff that they're doing in Liberty Mutual. I think we're behind in a sense, right? Like we're not as evolved as you in terms of like internal sharing of constructs and stuff like that, but we're definitely going in that direction, and it's been really fun and very valuable to have that internal community yell at us every time we break something, and like we actually get a very, very loud customer that's very, very close to our heart and easy to not easy to satisfy.
Sure. Thank you. So Matt, why don't you talk a little bit more about what Liberty's been doing with it? What did your first initial adoption look like? And what were some of those struggles that you guys had at making this really an organization-wide standard for doing your builds and your deployments?
Yep. So my first encounter with CDK was, I'm going to say July last year. I've been deploying serverless solutions on AWS for a few years, but essentially, whenever we were trying to deploy a private API gateway with a custom OAuth2 ping authorizer Lambda, it was taking over 1,000 lines of CloudFormation template to do that. Plus, it didn't, let's just say API gateway has quirks that you need to rename deployment IDs and things to get it to actually deploy in CloudFormation out of the box. So CloudFormation with serverless was painful on day one. Now, I know Eric's probably busting to tell me that's fixed with SAM. But
I am.
Yeah.
It is fixed with SAM.
Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen right now. No, go ahead.
Yeah, but that's the, remember this was last year. And basically, I took a couple of weeks and I rewrote our internal process into a construct library that I could share internally and reduced it to something crazy like 14 lines of code. So developers went from having thousands of lines of CloudFormation that they were either getting from somewhere like Maven because it's too much to just pass it out to, okay, let's pull it in via our internal NPM and let's just get it deployed. So that was where it hooked me. And I went, this is something that'll be amazing for Liberty that can transform how we deploy software. But from there, we then needed to create the environment for the developers to actually use it. And we've never once said you have to do it. That's the key thing here. We've just said, if this works for you, go ahead and use it. But if it doesn't work, SAM is an awesome option. Serverless framework's an awesome option. CloudFormation's an awesome option. Terraform's an awesome option. But what we're talking about is, what is the fastest way we can get the business value deployed to production? That's what we care about. And that's why there's an awesome team in Liberty who are called the Accelerator team, who hopefully are cheering about now for their name being mentioned. And they've created a framework that Elad's seen it. I think I showed it to him. But essentially, whenever developers are creating their entire CloudFormation or their CDK stacks, their abstraction, you can go in and share it with anybody else in the organization. So you can actually, it's a bit like SAR for CDK, only for Liberty Mutual. And
SAR is
serverless application repository.
That's right. That's right. It starts with serverless, and then there's an application and a repository. But yes, no, that's a good layout. So
yeah, and so that's the thing. Taking that approach of enabling the developers, as well as using CDK patterns to say, okay, here is how you can use it, and this works with all of our technology that we have created for you. I think has really been our approach, as opposed to mandating anything or any other approach.
Seeing an otter drink a giant amount of Diet Dr. Pepper out of a huge mug is always going to put a smile on my face.
That's right. It's not something you see every day, that's for sure. So, hey, I want to take a moment. Thorsten, if you've got a minute, I know you're helping us host and stuff like that, but what are you doing with CDK?
Yeah, so I'm, first of all, contributing a lot to CDK. So this is one of the things I really love. So I got hooked up with it. Okay, it's really great. This is the future of infrastructure as code. So I dive deep and tried, okay, this is missing, so I'm adding it. And before I knew, okay, there's this kind of ranking on GitHub, and there's a very small number next to my name, so why? So I'm very on top of the things. So, and then I added more and more constructs, so I was really happy to see the AppSync talk, because that's one of the things I initially wrote. Now it's a lot better, but it was my first code. And so this is what I'm doing with CDK, and now I'm going all in consulting my clients on doing infrastructure as code, and then doing it using CDK, writing libraries for enterprise compliance things like that. And yeah, for the community, as I'm one of the community heroes, so community is always my thing. So doing the CDK happy hour and the German CDK happy hour and managing all these things to bring the community together for these things. So I'm really happy to have this CDK day, and it was, no thinking, sure, I will join.
Awesome.
So one thing that I think a lot of people wondered, at least I know I did, was the CDK and Terraform. You know, these in a lot of ways are sort of competing products. Their goal is to make the infrastructure as code, a nice painless sort of thing. So where do Mishra and Sebastian, where do you hope to see this Terraform CDK go in the future, as it's still fairly early stage, but are you expecting, or do you hope that it replaces anything with the HCL, or do you really see this as a side-by-side fit?
I guess Sebastian can talk about the particularly to the project itself and the goals that we have for the project. But as part of HashiCorp, like, this is the way we look at it. I think I presented in the keynote that one diagram with Terraform is kind of the platform, and there's many entry points. So, all of these, like, we want to enable more and more entry points as they become available. We've always been that company. I don't know if you've used HashiCorp projects, from Vault to Terraform to Console. There's many other projects that we do, and actually we're going to announce two new projects coming HashiConf soon. The interesting thing is that we always really lean heavily in enabling the ecosystem and where the users really want to take the project. So I think when Elad and kind of the AWS CDK team came up with this idea, it was a pretty obvious thing for us to do. HCL is still going to be our I guess kind of the main front door into Terraform. But I think CDK for Terraform, as it matures, we'll see the community, where the community is kind of, going towards and kind of understand the popularity of the project. And then based on that, make decisions for the roadmap that will, just make it better every time. I know Sebastian and I have particular, few different goals with the project right now. We're adding new languages, and so on. And we have a really thriving open source contributor community as well. There's been a lot of good contributions from the community, which is not coming from me and Sebastian. So it is a good indication that, people are finding it interesting, and just enables you to do things in a way, like kind of a very concise, familiar way that that you've been using in your day-to-day life as a software engineer. So yeah, that's kind of the perspective from our side. I don't know, Sebastian, if you want to add something.
Yeah, sure. So Yeah, so for me, it's really, well, like short term, it's mostly about stabilizing what we have at the moment and like maturing, like around the existing things we built already. But like more midterm, long term, I really hope that we can cater to more complex use cases and also get the community involved into building abstractions. Like, I think abstractions are in the end what it makes really valuable. Like that's what's really valuable about the AWS CDK as well. And there went lots and lots of work into this. So I don't think we can provide this like out of the box at the moment. I will have a talk later where we'll talk about this like a bit, what the options are at the moment and what the options might be in the future. But yeah, so like having done like a large migration projects for like 2 years, like one project, and I was really missing something like the CDK or something like CDK for Terraform. So like, like the software engineering background, it's, yeah, just you're used to so many awesome tools that you can use on a daily basis. And yeah, I hope to bring this to the Terraform community.
Awesome.
All right.
So we got about 5 minutes before we go into our next talk. I did want to have a lot talk about one thing in particular, because this is an issue that seems to come up a lot within the CDK forums and the communities, and I often see it being sort of unfairly used to throw the CDK under the bus. And I want to make sure that it's addressed here regarding dependencies, the version changes, and breaking changes within the API. One thing that happens very common is someone will be working on a CDK module, they do an npm install or an install of a new module, and all of a sudden things break and won't compile because we have a version mismatch between the modules. Can you talk real quick a lot about what the future roadmap is for resolving that issue?
Sure. I'll start from the end, and then I can talk a little bit about why we got here. But basically, we're planning a V2 of the AWS CDK. And the two main things the V2 is going to do is actually we're trying to not do anything to make sure that migration is not too hard, is solve the dependency problem and solve the breaking changes problem. So basically the goal for V2 is to, first of all, stop publishing experimental APIs that are not opt-in. So once you will want to, if you want to use experimental APIs, you will have to explicitly opt in to use those APIs. We're still not sure whether it's going to be per API or globally or feature flags, or we're not exactly sure about the mechanism, because in terms of breaking changes, we're really working very hard, and we have a lot of tooling to protect us against breaking changes in stable modules. The problem is that the CDK currently contains multitude of experimental modules and multitude of experimental APIs within stable modules. And so as a user, in certain languages, actually, it might be super easy for you to use an experimental API and then get broken in the next release of the CDK because we decided to change the name and we were like, this is an experimental API, we can play with it. And so we actually want to make this way more formal, way more strict. And we want to enable people to just opt out, or basically the default will be to opt out from experimental APIs. And so ideally the breaking changes experience is going to improve. And the other thing is the dependency hell that we got ourselves into. And to be honest, it's basically, we just took the wrong turn. When we created the CDK, one of the first decisions we had to make was whether we vend the CDK in multiple modules or in a single module. And we actually took example from the AWS SDKs, which went the other way. Like if you are familiar with the history of the AWS SDKs, some of them originally started as a single monolithic module and then started to break that apart because AWS got bigger and bigger. And the footprint of the SDK is actually important, right? Like if you run the SDK within a Lambda function or in IoT devices or things like that, you actually need them, or web, you actually need the minimal amount of code to be downloaded to the device. Time. Anyway.
No, the time. Smaller. Yeah, I was emphasizing small in the, smaller, very, very important.
Yeah, yep. Exactly. It needs to be smaller.
Yeah.
The CDK doesn't actually have these constraints, right? Like CDK is mostly a build time tool. And so if you download, even if you download 20 megabytes worth of package in order to, during your build process, it's actually negligible. And so what we're doing in V2 is we're basically combining all of the CDK into a single library. You're going to have a single dependency, and there's not going to be any problems because it's monolithic. So basically, a library would just say, I need the user to bring CDK version 2.35 and above, and then only the application would bring the dependency, and we're going to have a single copy of the CDK in the dependency graph. Hopefully, it's going to improve load time, install times, and things like that. And we actually already have a prototype. Our internal users are already starting to use this. So we're trying to get that out there. I can't really commit to a date because you guys all know how software projects work. But we have an active implementation plan, an active RFC that we're working against, and so hopefully that's going to come up within the next few months.